Survivor's Guild is a common issue among demon slayers within the demon slaying corps, with many members joining the organization after a tragedy caused by a demon strikes their families or community, be it like those of the Butterfly Estate who lost their families to a rogue demon attack, or the Shinagazawa brothers who had a family member forcibly converted, though sometimes joining the corps only brings more tragedy your way, as the work you encounter while being a demon slayer can deaden one's emotions. And this runs true for the stoic and sagacious samurai serenely sanitizing society by slaughtering sacrilegious savages, Giyu Tomioka, the Water Pillar. Giyu Tomioka is the acting water pillar of the demon-slaying corps and one of the major characters in the story of Kimetsu no Yaiba. Not only being the first introduction to demon slayers as a whole, but developing a close personal bond with Tanjiro and his sister Nezuko, thanks to his own experiences in life. And while he is significantly strong, especially for his position as a pillar, he does seem to hold himself back or devalue his own achievements, all due to the regret that he acquired while pursuing the life of a demon slayer. Though before we get too into that, let's discuss first the meaning behind his name and design. Giyu Tomioka is a name that works very well with the standard naming themes of Kimetsu no Yaiba, where his name seems to be selected to reflect a portion of his character and his character's story. Starting first with his given name, Tomioka, which is comprised of the characters for rich or abundant and hill and mountain, with some readings of the last character being just height as well. So altogether, the name means rich mountain or rich hill, and given his position as a pillar in the demon slaying corps, he is always above Tanjiro, someone that Tanjiro can always look up to till the end of the series and want to be on equal footing with, so he's constantly climbing up the ladder of success or climbing up the hill to try to match up to Giyu. Giyu is also specifically leading him in this direction, acting as sort of a wealth of information for Tanjiro, trying to get him down the right path so that he can in fact replace him as the water pillar at some point. Along with this, his given name, Giyu, when broken down, is comprised of the characters for righteousness, heroism, and courage, which plays into his own sense of justice, which he tries to uphold in an unbiased way. He even claims that he doesn't hate demons like other pillars in the corps do, which is shown with him willing to spare them if they prove themselves to actually want to change and not kill or eat a human. Though those guilty of the inhuman or evil act, Giyu is the first to strike them down, even if the person who converted is very close to him. As seen when Tanjiro momentarily becomes the Demon King and bites Nezuko, Giyu is the first person to spring into action to try to stop him. And it's this same sense of justice that Giyu follows that has driven him to become the powerful demon slayer that he is, as he's not only honed his natural strength and speed to superhuman levels, as seen when he's fast enough to be able to wrap up Inosuke, someone who has a special talent for sensing when someone is approaching him before he even noticed. Along with this, he is extremely durable, able to take on physical blows from the Upper Moon 3 and continue fighting. Though on top of all of that, Giyu is a renowned swordsman. With all intents and purposes, he is a master of the demon slaying technique known as the water breathing style. Water breathing style is one of the main 5 breathing styles in the series that derive from the sun breathing style, and they're the one that dictates all the ones below them. And it, alongside fire breathing style, are mainstays among pillars. There is always a fire pillar and always a water pillar at some point in the demon slaying corps. And those gifted with a natural talent for water breathing style have their Nichiran changed to a blue color. And with Giyu's specific Nichiran, he has a handguard which takes the shape of a hexagonal overlapping border, which gives me the impression of a whirlpool, which is played into during the final battle where Giyu has that sword break, and midway through the battle he's given a hilt of another water-breathing swordsman who has a more blatant whirlpool shape to their handguard, making me think that that was an intentional design from the beginning. Now, the water-breathing or breath of water slaying style seems to imitate the real-life swordsman style of Ito Ryu, or a more theatrical version of Yagayu Shinkage Ryu, which in itself is an evolution of Yagayu Shingen Ryu, with the major difference between them being that Shinkage focuses more on swordplay, though it does keep the core ideals of Shingen Ryu, which is all about feeling out or reading your opponent's actions, as the term Shingen means mind's or heart's eye, and directly translates to an ability to sense or read an opponent's intentions via your own internal instincts, which works very well as Tanjiro describes visualizing a string of swords from the scent of his opponent that guides his blade to the right place. And while not exactly the same, I imagine the same similar idea applies to anyone who uses a breath of water style attack. Giyu even stated that Urukodaki had a similar sense of smell. And speaking of Giyu, he performs a good number of the Breath of the Water style attacks over the course of the series, as while he's not shown to do every attack, it is stated that he mastered all 10 forms cultivated by Urokodaki, but also inventing a style of his own in the 11th form, though with each form of the water-breathing technique comes a whole meaning of its own. So let's discuss Breath of Water as a whole in depth. Starting first with, of course, the first form, Water Surface Slash, where a Slayer arcs back for a single, powerful vertical slash, which takes on the visual effect of a calm water surface, which, in the most part, is the whole naming theme behind the attack, as it is a very straightforward name, likely because the attack is designed to represent the core ideals of Ayato Ryu, which is all about single, heavy slashes or cleaves intended to defeat an opponent in one hit. Along with this, just like how Breath of Thunder bases all of its foundation on the Thunderclap and Flash, Breath of Water is the same way with Water Surface Slash, as it's all about being one with the surface of water, trying to be calm within your attacks. Then next you have the second form, Water Wheel, where a Slayer lunges forward and spins in the air in a circular motion, while releasing a single rotating strike at their opponent. This is a pretty direct evolution of the first form Single Slash, modified slightly. Along with this, you can modify the position or arc of your spin by performing a lateral water wheel as well, but it achieves the same effect as the normal water wheel. The name itself is in reference to a water wheel, of course, which is a very basic engine and became hugely popular in Japan, leading to the invention of a water mill, which led to the mass production of a lot of food. And a working water wheel is now considered a symbol of prosperity in Japan, where a broken one or a decommissioned one is considered a sign of issues for the town. And with the attack now being used to behead demons, it sort of keeps up that symbolic meaning of prosperity as you're destroying evil. Following this, you have the third form, Flowing Dance, where the Slayer begins a rhythmic motion that is designed for both offensive and defensive purposes, as it allows the user to approach a target while blocking or disarming attacks with a multitude of counterstrikes of their own, and once they get to their desired destination, they can release another set of strikes with violent force. The idea behind this attack is based on the energy that travels through the flow of waves on a river's surface. Along with this, it's likely the Flowing Dance is the point of origin for the insect breathing techniques, as most of their attacks are styled after mimicking a dance of sorts. Working under the same logic comes the fourth form, Striking Tide, where a Slayer in a flow of strikes twists their body like a wave to curve their blade with the intent to sever all the limbs from a demon. This attack, much like Flowing Dance, works under the logic of the kinetic force that travels within waves on the water. These two wave-like attacks are likely also based on Japan and its own connection to tides, with one of the most famous cases being the Great Wave of Kanagawa, which is an extremely popular painting that depicts an enormous wave looming over 3 boats off the coast of Kanagawa. It was part of an art project known as the 36 Views from Mount Fuji, and its iconic water shape is likely what impacted the visual effects that accompany the Breath of Water's strikes. Though to step away from the aggressive and powerful attacks, you have the fifth form, Blessed Rain After a Drought, which is an attack designed to mercy kill a demon, likely so a Slayer could kill a mourning one with little to no pain, and the attack itself is performed during a free fall to imitate the fall of rain. The name itself is very self-explanatory, as droughts were and still are a big global fear, especially for farmers, and the rain that comes to end them usually is considered a favorable act of the gods or a blessing on the farm, so much so that the Japanese character for falling like rain can also be read as a blessing. And then you have the sixth form, Whirlpool, in which a Slayer will twist their body in a way that creates a whirlwind-like attack that cuts and shreds anything that enters its area. Along with that, if used underwater, the whirlwind becomes a whirlpool that draws in those around them, sucking them to their doom. This attack, alongside the previous mentioned ones, is likely in reference to the works of Utaga Kiniyoshi, such as Samurai in the Wave and Whirlpool, which are two paintings that demonstrate powerful typhoons that protected Japan from the Mongolian invasion of 1274 to 1281, reinforced by the samurais at the time describing the wicked winds of the wave as divine in nature, as they destroyed evil. In a similar sense, the Breath of Water style destroys evil when it slays demons. And if a Breath of Water user were to take the general motions of the sixth form, Whirlpool, and combine them together with the fourth form, Flowing Dance, they can perform a combination attack known as the Whirlpool Flow. Following this, you also have the fastest thrusting move in the entirety of the Breath of Water's arsenal, this being the seventh form, Piercing Raindrop, where a Slayer lunges forward with a single powerful piercing strike. strike. This causes all the kinetic force of their lunge to ripple outward upon contact, similar to the effect of a raindrop striking the surface of water, creating a wave or ripple. And from there we have the 8th form, Waterfall Basin, where a slayer raises their sword well above their head and brings it down with their full force and strength, mimicking that of a waterfall's intense pressure and cleaving most things they strike in half. This is likely in reference to how waterfalls were used as endurance training tactics for samurais, where they would sit under or at the basin of a waterfall and try to focus through the icy stingy pain and overwhelming pressure constantly being forced onto them. It's a training method that actually is used in the series as well. And then you have the 9th form, Splashing Water Flow, which is a form of attack where the user works on minimizing the amount of time they need to spend on the ground, along with reducing the surface they need to take off and spinning in the air, making the attack extremely useful in areas where footing is awkward. And this attack was likely created as an advanced form of Whirlpool Flow, adding onto it the aerial aspect of the 2nd form, Water Wheel. The concept behind this attack appears to be based on the idea of ninjas or shinobi being able to run across water by minimizing the amount of surface needed to take off for their next lunge. And finally, we reach the final of Urokodaki's own 10 foundations, with the 10th form, Constant Flux Dragon, where a user would implement everything they've learned up to this point from Breath of the Water, attacking with a seemingly endless flow of slices that all increase in power and speed as they continue, combining together all of the forms, be it the 3rd's dancing-like movements or the 4th's twisting strikes, right down to the 8th's final downward thrust, all while a powerful figure of a dragon follows closely behind the user. This is both in reference to the crashing force of waves, as they get stronger and stronger over time, starting of course with weak waves that slowly become all-consuming giant tsunamis, very similar in shape to the Great Wave of Kanagawa. And on top of that, the dragon-like figure following the user is likely in reference to another of Utagawa Kunyoshi's many depictions of powerful waves, where a lot of them depict dragons residing within the waves themselves, one in specific being the Palace of the Dragon King. And all of these forms, in part, were mastered by Giyu in one way, training under Urokodaki until the moment in which Giyu invented his own addition to the style, one which took the bombastic movements of it and limited them heavily, reducing them down to a lulling calm. This took the shape of the 11th form, Dead Calm, which is a state where Giyu ceases any unnecessary movements, appearing to be completely still, and the reason for this being is he is calming his mind and creating the ultimate defense, focusing solely on deflecting or blocking oncoming strikes with extreme speed, which to most is so fast that Giyu appears to have never have moved to begin with. The idea behind the attack is to become the embodiment of the style, taking out the violence and aggression of Breath of Water, which creates a calm ocean surface, with no waves or wind to move the water, turning it into a mirror-like surface which reflects back anything that approaches it. And in a way, Giyu's own design reflects this attack in nature, with one portion of his overcoat being a still, calm color on his left side, but with his right side having a strange pattern to it, which, to me, looks like an origami boat, making his outfit look like two sides of the visual representation of Dead Calm. And Giyu was able to invent this technique, both because of how hard he pushed himself during training, of course, but also thanks to his calm and stoic state of mind. But he wasn't always so stoic. In fact, Giyu was as much a normal child as anyone else, until the day that demons showed up and slaughtered his family, and his sister sacrificed herself to save Giyu by hiding him away, a selfless act made even more apparent by the fact that she would have been married the next morning. And this night filled Giyu with rage and hatred, causing him to lash out at those around him and blame the demons for the death of his sister. But due to the fact that the existence of demons was not public knowledge, he was labeled insane and racked with guilt over the death of his family. Due to this, Giyu was sent away to one of his relatives, who was a doctor, but he escaped during the transfer and ended up fleeing into the mountains, where he almost died alone, until Urokodaki showed up and rescued him, taking Giyu under his wing and training him in the Breath of the Water style. Here, Giyu would meet and befriend another boy during his training named Sabito. They would become fast friends due to a similar upbringing and growing and developing together, Sabito enforcing the idea into Giyu to live on no matter what. Though when the two would enter the final selection together, Giyu would get injured and Sabito would help him hide from the demons. He would then go on to slay every demon on the mountain, protecting all those in danger, until Sabito encountered encountered, the Hand Demon, who took advantage of his thick neck, breaking Sabito's blade and crushing his head in a defenseless state. But this occurred during the final night of the selection, and thanks to this action, everyone that night survived and passed. But to Giyu, this was yet again another person sacrificing themselves to save him, which in turn resulted in Giyu falling into a depressive state, one where he would begin to cry and cry and cry until his tears had dried up, and along with his tears, so did his emotions as well, turning him into the hollow shell of a person that we know now. Giyu would then go on to train endlessly, working tirelessly in his demon-slaying training so that he could live up to the legend that was his friend, thinking all the while that he should have been the one who died that day. And this training would result in him earning the rank of the Water Pillar within the demon-slaying corps, though to him, it was a false title, as he could never recognize himself as such, and it's through this hatred of himself that led Giyu to picking his own fights and training to expend as little energy as possible when fighting. As to him, fighting only brought him pain, because he could never compare to a real swordsman like Sabito, and it's through this mentality that he created Dead Calm, a technique which required minimal effort on his part, but its effectiveness was undoubtable, so strong in fact that it's likely the reason that he was brought up to pillar status. Interestingly enough, something that I feel reinforces the idea that Giyu's design is connected directly to Dead Calm is that the boat pattern that we see on Giyu comes directly from Sabito, as Giyu only used to wear the single solid color during his training, but after Sabito's death, he physically carries a memory of his friend with him everywhere he goes, leading of course to the constant comparison that then resulted in the technique known as Dead Calm. And it was through this hard work that he would come to meet an assortment of people of many different makes and talents. From seemingly his close friend Shinobu, who the two likely bonded over their survivor's guilt and inferiority complexes, to powerful figures like Rengoku, who beam with the same energy as Sabito, which likely made Rengoku's death later in the series hurt all that much more for Giyu specifically. But, most importantly, he would meet a young boy with a recently demonified sister, who would go on to change his life forever. This was Tanjiro and his sister, Nezuko. And one thing that's made very clear in their first interaction is how much Giyu sees a lot of himself in Tanjiro. A sad, scared boy who's close to losing his sister, Giyu grew uncharacteristically angry with him, lecturing him about being weak, which in turn might have been him projecting a bit onto himself, which then results in Giyu blaming himself for Tanjiro's own suffering and the state that he's in now. Though Giyu does hate when people don't seem to know their own limits as well, likely because it's that mentality that gets those he cares about killed. But Tanjiro proves his commitment to his words that he was going to save his sister, and demonstrates its potential with a fake-out attack that impressed Giyu. Along with this, the demonic Nezuko protecting her brother likely triggered memories of Giyu's own sister, causing him to spare her as well. It helped, of course, by the fact that Nezuko was still an innocent demon who hadn't eaten a person yet, and she was showing signs that she was still holding on a bit to her humanity. From here, he would contact his former master and ask that Tanjiro be taken under his wing in a similar fashion to the way he was, hoping that Tanjiro would learn the way of the breath of water and become the new water pillar that the Foundation needed, considering that he doesn't believe himself to be a true pillar at the time. Though while Tanjiro worked hard in his training, Giyu would continue his work and travel as a demon slayer, hunting down cases and reports of demonic-like activity and showing up to assist a person the best he could, even though with his current stoic nature and honest heart, it left him prey to a lot of misunderstanding. And of course dogs. Though he would eventually meet up with Tanjiro again during the events of the Spider Forest arc, arriving just in time to save him from a fatal attack, commending him for being able to hold his own up until the point that he arrived. Then finishing off the remaining Lower Moon Demon with his Dead Calm attack. He would also defend Tanjiro and Nezuko from his own comrades, blocking Shinobu's attack on Nezuko, which in turn broke the code of the demon-slaying corps and angered Shinobu enough that she insulted him, which, given his already low self-esteem, probably cut a lot deeper than he could emote. But her words do carry some modicum of truth to it, as Giyu doesn't seem to be looked at in a positive light among the other, as Giyu doesn't adhere solely to the code of the demon-slaying corps, and uses his own form of justice taught to him by Sabito, even willing to interfere in official business like pillar meetings, and refusing to take part in pillar training routines, which has led in part to bad relationships with a lot of the other pillars, but in specifically Shinagazawa, who hates Giyu for his inability to express himself accurately, though when Giyu does find someone who he considers to be a close friend, he tends to stick his neck out for them, like in the case of Tanjiro, who he not only spared, but directed towards Uratoriki, and put his life on the line for Nezuko, claiming that if Tanjiro was unsuccessful in his training and let Nezuko eat a human, Giyu would take his own life in response, and in return for saving Tanjiro, the boy would unknowingly save Giyu from himself, being not only a genuine friend to the man, as Tanjiro not only looked up to Giyu as a mentor, but also reminded him of the promise he made to Sabito all all those years ago to continue on living no matter what and never wish that he had died in the place of someone else, the two of them also seem to be interconnected by fate, as during the Dimension Infinity Fortress arc, the two would find each other right away and team up together to take on the Upper Moon 3rd demon, Akaza. And it's during his fight with Akaza, after feeling the overwhelming strength of the Upper Moon 3 and seeing the monumental growth of Tanjiro, Giyu finally pushes beyond the mental barrier that he had built up all those years ago. He goes beyond the Sabato that he's been building up in his imagination all these years, and in doing so, awakens to his own inner potential, discarding fully the dead calm that has held him back all these years in favor of a Slayer mark, which took the form of a large flowing watery river-like shape, though even with unlocking this power, him and Tanjiro still needed to work together to defeat Akaza, though this is likely due to the fact that Giyu and Tanjiro are connected even at a meta sense as well, as looking at Kimetsu no Yaiba's development, we see that Giyu had a prototype design that wasn't too different than what he looks like now, but even older than that was a prototype for Tanjiro's design, which is much different than his finalized version, with him being a one-armed samurai with a scarred face and long hair that resembles Giyu's own large hair, leading me to believe that a portion of this design was used in Giyu's own, especially since at the ending of Kimetsu no Yaiba, Giyu would end up losing the same arm as the prototype design in the final battle with Muzan. And speaking of the final battle with Muzan, during this fight, he was not only able to reconnect with Shinagazawa, with the two of them teaming up together and creating a Crimson Nichiran blade, but also with his fated partner Tanjiro, as the two of them landed one of the final blows on Muzan's main body, though in a final moment, Tanjiro would push Giyu aside, protecting him from being consumed by Muzan's massive form. And with Tanjiro assumed dead, Giyu cries again for the first time in years, reflecting on how it's always like this, he's the one always being saved. Though when Tanjiro reveals that he has been turned into the vessel for the next Demon King, it's Giyu's actions that helps bring him back from the verge of death, finally being able to save someone he cares about, fully, for the first time. Giyu Tomioka's story is that of a man who loses his feelings, becoming as calm or lifeless like the still water he trained to imitate. But over the course of the series, others would bring in the waves in the form of Tanjiro or the wind in the form of Shinagazawa, who would force Giyu to change overall. He is one of Koihara Sensei's best and most beautifully written characters, along with being one of the greatest characters in all of Kimetsu no Yaiba as a whole. Seeing his story slowly unfold as the chapters were releasing, along with seeing his stoic veil lifted during certain interactions with his closest friends, usually ended up being some of my favorite moments in the whole series. In short, I love Giyu Tomioka, and I hope this video helped you love him too. And if you did enjoy this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/Meti, not the bad guy. Patreon is a very helpful tool. It helps keep this channel flowing as smoothly as it does. And if you want to start mastering your own Breath of the Lewd, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist at buyshimonetta.com.